The leather of the chair is cold against my back, a stark contrast to the fire raging in my veins. The air in the conference room is sterile, smelling of lemon polish and expensive paper. It's a room built for dismantling lives, for turning years of shared history into assets and liabilities. My lawyer, Ms. Davies, sits to my right, her face a mask of calm professionalism. She is a shark in a tailored suit, and today we are going hunting. Across the table, an empty chair waits. And next to me, another man sits in a chair identical to mine. His name is David. His hands are clasped so tightly his knuckles are white. We don't look at each other. We don't need to. We are two halves of the same jagged wound, stitched together by betrayal and a cold, shared purpose. The door opens, and Mark walks in. My husband. He's wearing that smile, the one that's all teeth and no warmth, the one he uses when he's about to win. He looks at me, a flicker of pity in his eyes. He thinks this is my last, desperate attempt. My little tantrum before I crawl back and accept whatever scraps he's willing to leave me. He doesn't see David.
Not yet.
His focus is entirely on me, the little bird with the broken wing he's so sure he can cage forever. Honey, he starts, his voice dripping with condescending sympathy. Are we really going to do this? Let's not make this ugly, he gestures to Ms. Davies, a dismissive wave. You can't afford her, his eyes finally drift to the man beside me. Confusion clouds his face. Just for a second. He doesn't recognize him. Why would he? In his world, other people are just scenery. He gives a curt nod, assuming David is part of my lawyer's team. He sits down in the empty chair, looking powerful, expansive, like a king holding court. He thinks he holds all the cards. He has no idea I've spent the last 6 months dealing from the bottom of a deck he never even knew existed. Ms. Davies clears her throat. The sound cuts through the silence. Mark, she says, her voice as sharp and clean as shattering glass. Before we begin, I believe you know my client. But I don't believe you've been formally introduced to her co-claimant. Mark's smile falters. He looks from me to David, a crease forming between his perfect eyebrows. I just watch him. I let the silence stretch, thin and tight. I've waited for this moment. I've lived on the thought of it, let it fuel me through sleepless nights and days of hollow smiles. This is the moment the world he built for himself begins to burn. And I am the one holding the match. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I read all the comments, and they remind me I'm not just talking into the void. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me share these stories, and it helps more than you know. Just 8 months ago, this room, this life, would have been unimaginable. My life was beige.
A confortable, prédictable, beige existence.
Mark and I had been married for 12 years. We lived in a house that was a little too big for 2 people, in a neighborhood where the lawns were always green and the secrets were always buried deep. Mark was a partner at a successful investment firm. He was charismatic, ambitious, and utterly consumed by his work. I used to think his long hours and constant preoccupation were the price of our comfortable life. I had a small floral business I ran from a studio in our guest house. It was my sanctuary, a place where I could create beauty, where things grew and blossomed under my care. Unlike our marriage, which had long felt like a plant left in a dark room, slowly withering from neglect. Mark called my business my little hobby. He'd say it with that same condescending smile, the one he wore walking into the lawyer's office. It's good for you to have something to keep you busy, he'd say, patting my head as if I were a child or a well-behaved pet. He managed all our finances. It wasn't a discussion. It was just the way things were. He was the expert, the one who understood the complex world of stocks and portfolios. My name was on the accounts, technically, but I had no passwords, no real access. He gave me an allowance, transferred to my personal account every month. Enough for groceries, for my business supplies, for the occasional lunch with friends. Not enough to ever feel free. He called it streamlining our finances. I now know it for what it was: control. He had built my cage so carefully, so slowly, that I hadn't even realized I was in it. The bars were gilded, the floor was soft, but it was a cage nonetheless. Our conversations had become scripts. How was your day, honey?
Fine.
Busy. Anything interesting happen? Just work stuff. You wouldn't understand, he stopped asking about my day years ago. My world, my thoughts, my feelings were too small to register in his orbit. He revolved around deals, acquisitions, and the constant, hungry pursuit of more. I was just a satellite, pulled along by his gravity, silent and predictable. Loneliness became my closest companion. It was a physical presence in our big, quiet house. It sat beside me on the couch while Mark worked late in his study. It lay between us in our king-sized bed, a cold, vast expanse of empty sheets. I'd tell myself this was just what marriage became after a decade. The initial fire cools to embers, then to ash. I told myself I should be grateful. I had a beautiful home, financial security, a husband who was, by all outward appearances, a good man. I was just being dramatic, ungrateful. That's what he'd tell me, anytime I'd try to voice the emptiness I felt. You have a perfect life, he'd say, not with anger, but with a weary sigh, as if my sadness was a profound inconvenience to him. Some women would kill to be in your position, he was right. And that was the most suffocating part. I was drowning in a life other people dreamed of, and I couldn't explain why I couldn't breathe. The discovery wasn't a single, dramatic moment. It was a slow, sickening trickle. A leaky faucet of lies that eventually flooded my world. It started with the scent of perfume on his suit jacket. A floral scent, but not one I wore. Something sweeter, cloying. When I asked, he laughed it off. Must have been a client. You know how some of them are hugging goodbye, I accepted it. What else could I do? Then there were the late nights that became later, the weekend business trips that became more frequent. He'd come home exhausted, distant, his phone always screened down on the nightstand. If I picked it up, just to plug it in, he would flinch, his body tensing beside me in the dark. The excuses were always plausible, always related to a big deal, a demanding client, a market that never slept. He spoke a language of finance I didn't understand, and he used it as a shield. He wrapped his betrayal in jargon and spreadsheets, making it impenetrable. The real crack in the facade came on a Tuesday. He was in the shower, and his phone, left on the bathroom counter, buzzed. It was a habit, a reflex, for me to glance at it. We were married. What was there to hide? The screen was lit up with a preview of a text message. From a contact named CFO, the message read, "Last night was incredible.
I can't stop thinking about you.
Left my earrings on your nightstand. Don't let your wife see them." Winky face. My blood ran cold. I froze, staring at the glowing screen. The water was running in the shower, the steam fogging the mirror, but it felt like the entire world had gone silent and still. CFO. Chief Financial Officer. I knew the CFO of his company. A man in his late 60s named Robert. This wasn't Robert. I looked at the nightstand on his side of the bed. Tucked behind his alarm clock, almost invisible, were a pair of small, diamond stud earrings. They weren't mine. I had never seen them before. My heart started hammering against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I backed out of the bathroom, my hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. I felt dizzy, disoriented. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. This couldn't be happening. Not to me. Not to us. I spent the rest of the day in a fog. I went to my studio, surrounded by the bright colors and fresh scents of flowers, but all I could see were those words on the screen. All I could feel was the icy dread spreading through my chest. When he came home that night, I tried to act normal. It was the hardest performance of my life. I watched him across the dinner table, watched him talk about his day, about a market downturn, about some deal he was closing. He was a stranger. Every word he said felt like a lie. Every smile, every touch, was a betrayal. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my plate against the wall. I wanted to hold up those earrings and demand an explanation. But I didn't. Some primal instinct, some deep, forgotten part of myself, whispered, "Wait. Don't show your hand. He thinks you are weak. He thinks you are predictable. If you scream, he will manage you. He will lie. He will gaslight you. He will turn it around and make it your fault. He will tell you you're crazy, that you're imagining things. And because he had done it so many times before, I knew it was true. So I swallowed my rage. I buried it deep inside, where it began to cool, to harden, from a raging fire into a solid core of ice. That night, as he slept beside me, his breathing deep and even, I slipped out of bed. I took his phone. His fingerprint was still programmed on my thumb from years ago, a relic of a time when we had nothing to hide. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold the device steady. I found the text thread.
CFO.
I scrolled up. Weeks. Months. Messages of illicit meetings, of inside jokes, of a shared life I had no part in.
They talked about me.
Is she suspicious? One text from her read. Mark's reply. No idea. She lives in her own little world of flowers and feelings. Utterly clueless, another one. What will you do if she finds out? His reply. She won't. And if she did? She's not going anywhere. She couldn't survive 2 days without me. The words hit me harder than a physical blow. Utterly clueless. She couldn't survive 2 days without me. It wasn't just the affair. It was the contempt, the absolute, soul-crushing disdain he had for me. He didn't just betray me. He thought I was a fool. A helpless, decorative fool. I sat there in the dark, the phone's light illuminating the tears streaming down my face. But underneath the hurt, a new feeling began to crystallize. A cold, quiet, and terrifying rage. He thought I was powerless. He thought I would just lie down and accept it. He had forgotten who I was before him. He had forgotten the girl who had clawed her way through hardship, who had built a life for herself from nothing. He had spent 12 years trying to make me forget it, too. That night, I stopped crying. I saved the number. I took pictures of the messages with my own phone until my battery died. I put his phone back on the nightstand, exactly as I'd found it. I crawled back into bed, and I lay there, motionless, staring into the darkness. He had made a fatal miscalculation. He thought he had broken me. He had no idea he had just woken me up. The first few weeks were a blur of managed panic. I was living a double life. On the surface, I was the same dutiful wife. I made his coffee in the morning, I asked about his day, I smiled and nodded in all the right places. But inside, I was a detective. An operative in my own home. My floral studio became my war room. Amidst the buckets of roses and eucalyptus, I had a laptop, a burner phone, and a notebook filled with scribbled timelines and questions. The rage was a constant hum beneath my skin. It kept me focused. Every condescending pat on the head, every dismissive comment about my hobby, added another log to the fire. I needed more than text messages. I needed a name. I needed a face. I ran the CFO number through a reverse lookup app. The name that came back was Chloe Sterling. A quick search on social media brought up her profile. She was beautiful, of course. Sharp, blonde, with a smile that looked both predatory and polished. Her profile was full of pictures of her at charity galas, on yachts, living a life of glossy perfection. She worked at a rival investment firm. The affair wasn't just personal, it was professional. Were they sharing insider information? The thought sparked a new, darker line of inquiry. But it was something else on her profile that made my breath catch in my throat. A picture of her with a man. He had his arm around her, a gentle, unassuming smile on his face. The caption read, "My amazing husband. Celebrating 10 years of love, my amazing husband." My heart ached for him. This man, this stranger, was living in the same fool's paradise I had been. He was smiling for a camera while his wife was texting mine about the earrings she'd left on his nightstand. His name was David Sterling. His profile was private, but it listed his occupation, high school history teacher. A teacher, not a banker, not a C-suite executive. A man who spent his days trying to inspire teenagers. He looked kind. The thought of him being played for a fool by my husband and his wife filled me with a strange, protective fury. I tried to push him out of my mind. This was my fight. But the thought of him kept returning. We were two sides of the same coin, oblivious partners in a drama we hadn't auditioned for. Mark continued his life with smug confidence. He was more affectionate, in a performative way. He'd bring me flowers, bought from a store, not from my own studio, which felt like its own special kind of insult. He'd tell me he was working so hard for us. For our future, he was laying the groundwork, I realized, for a potential divorce narrative where he was the hardworking provider and I was the ungrateful, emotionally unstable wife. He was poisoning the well before I even knew I was thirsty. He controlled the money so tightly. I started looking for ways to get access to our financial records. I tried logging into our bank accounts, but he had changed all the passwords. When I asked him for one, feigning a need to check a transaction, he smiled that patient, patronizing smile. "Don't you worry your pretty little head about that, honey. I've got it all handled. Just focus on your flowers." It was meant to be reassuring, but it felt like a door slamming shut in my face. He was locking me out. He was making sure that if I ever got brave enough to leave, I would leave with nothing. That was his insurance policy. He didn't think I had the intelligence or the resources to fight back. He saw me as a liability to be managed, not an equal to be respected. The helplessness was crushing. For a few days, I almost gave in to despair. He was right. How could I fight him? He had the best lawyers on retainer. He had all the money. I had a flower business that barely broke even, and an allowance that wouldn't cover a week's rent. I was trapped. I would have to either accept his betrayal and live as a smiling ghost in my own home, or leave and face a future of poverty and struggle. He had left me with no good options. One night, I was in my studio, staring at a blank wall, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on me. I felt like I was at the bottom of a deep, dark well, with no way to climb out. And then I thought of David Sterling, the history teacher, the man with the kind smile. Mark's confidence came from his belief that he was fighting a lone, weak opponent. He had isolated me. He had made me believe I was alone. But what if I wasn't? The idea was terrifying. Contacting a stranger? Unburdening my deepest marital secrets? It felt insane. It felt desperate. But as I looked around my studio, at the beautiful things I had created, a spark of defiance ignited in the cold darkness of my despair. Mark thought my world was small. He thought my little hobby was insignificant. But in this small world, I had control. I understood the delicate balance of things. I knew how to nurture something, but I also knew how to prune, how to cut away the rot to save the plant. The plan that began to form was audacious. It was risky. It was unlike anything I had ever done before. But it was mine. I went back to David's profile. I looked at that picture of him and Chloe, at his trusting smile. Mark and Chloe had made us victims. They had written us into their sordid story as the pathetic, clueless spouses. I decided it was time we started writing a story of our own. My finger hovered over the send message button for what felt like an hour. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. I was about to cross a line from which there was no return. I had found David Sterling's email address through his school's website. I had drafted and redrafted the message 100 times. It was short, vague, but urgent. "Mr. Sterling, my name is Sarah. I am Mark's wife. I believe our spouses are working together, and I have discovered some information that I think you need to see. I know this is unorthodox, but I believe it's in our mutual best interest to speak privately." I finally hit send, my hand shaking. The waiting was agony. Every notification on my phone made me jump. I imagined him reading it, thinking I was some crazy, jealous wife. I imagined him showing it to Chloe, the two of them laughing at my pathetic attempt to cause trouble. For 2 days, there was nothing. The silence was a crushing weight. I started to think I had made a terrible mistake. Maybe Mark was right. Maybe I was in over my head. Maybe I should just delete the message, retreat back into my beige life, and learn to live with the quiet heartbreak. Then, on the 3rd day, an email appeared in my inbox. The sender was anonymous, the subject line blank. The body of the message had only a time and the address of a small, discreet coffee shop in a town 30 miles away. No name, no confirmation.
Just a time and a place.
My stomach twisted into a knot of fear and exhilaration. This was it. I drove to the coffee shop with my burner phone and a folder of evidence tucked in my bag. I chose a booth in the back corner, my back to the wall. I ordered a tea I didn't touch. Every person who walked through the door made my pulse quicken. 10 minutes after the agreed-upon time, a man walked in. He scanned the room, his eyes filled with a nervous energy that I recognized instantly. It was him, David Sterling. He looked older than in his pictures, more tired. There were shadows under his kind eyes. He saw me, and for a moment, he hesitated at the door, as if he might turn and run. I gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. He walked over and slid into the booth across from me. He didn't say hello. He just looked at me, his expression a mixture of dread and grim resolve. "Show me," he said, his voice quiet, hoarse. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I slid the folder across the table. It contained printouts of the text messages, screenshots of their call logs, and a timeline I had painstakingly created of Mark's business trips that corresponded with Chloe's social media posts from the same luxury hotels. He opened the folder. I watched his face as he read. I saw the slow, dawning horror, the flicker of denial, and then the crushing weight of acceptance. His kind smile was gone, replaced by a mask of profound, gut-wrenching pain. He didn't speak for a long time. He just stared at the pages, his hands gripping the edges of the folder as if to keep himself from falling apart. When he finally looked up, his eyes were glassy, with unshed tears. "The earrings," he whispered, his voice cracking. "She told me she lost one. I bought her a new pair for our anniversary last month." The raw grief in his voice was a mirror of my own. In that moment, we weren't strangers. We were allies, bonded by the same intimate betrayal. He told me about Chloe, how she had become more distant, more critical, how she'd started working late, just like Mark. He believed her. He'd supported her career, taken on more of the household responsibilities, celebrated her successes, all while she was living a second life with my husband. His pain was so palpable it was hard to breathe. "What do you want to do?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "I want to burn it all to the ground," I said. The words came out colder, harder than I expected. The ice in my core was spreading. David looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something other than pain in his eyes.
It was respect.
"They think we're weak," I continued, my voice low but steady. "They think we're collateral damage. Mark thinks I'm a helpless idiot who can't survive without him. He controls every penny. He thinks that makes him invincible. Chloe is the same," David said, a new hardness in his own voice. "She calls me her rock, her stable foundation. I think she just means I'm predictable. Easy to manage." We sat in silence for another minute, the grim reality of our situation settling around us. We were the good spouses. The stable, predictable, boring ones. The ones they could count on to keep the home fires burning while they were out setting our lives on fire. "A direct confrontation is what they expect," I said, thinking aloud. "We yell, we cry. They deny, they gaslight. They'll control the narrative. They will make us the villains. The crazy wife, the pathetic husband." David nodded slowly, understanding completely. "So we don't give them the fight they're prepared for." "No," I said, leaning forward. "We give them a war they don't even see coming." That coffee shop meeting was the beginning of our alliance. We met in secret, sometimes in parks, sometimes in quiet library corners. We communicated only through encrypted messaging apps on our burner phones. We became co-conspirators, our grief slowly morphing into a shared, meticulous strategy. David, it turned out, was not just a kind-faced history teacher. He was methodical, patient, and incredibly observant. He had a mind for details, for connecting dates and events in a way I hadn't. I had the fire, the driving rage that had pushed me to act. He had the calm, strategic mind that could channel that fire into a laser. We started digging deeper. This wasn't just about proving an affair anymore. This was about dismantling the arrogant, entitled world they had built on our backs. David noticed something I had missed. Chloe had received a massive bonus 6 months ago, A bonus she'd claimed was for landing a huge new client. At the same time, Mark had authorized a significant and questionable investment from his firm into a startup that, on paper, looked like a long shot. The startup was owned by Chloe's brother. "It's not just an affair," David said one rainy afternoon as we huddled under an awning in a deserted park. "It's fraud. They're using their positions to enrich themselves and each other." The pieces started to click into place. The late nights weren't just about secret dinners. They were about cooking the books. The shared trips weren't just romantic getaways. They were about finalizing their schemes. Their betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was criminal. The risk terrified me. We were no longer just two wronged spouses seeking a fair divorce settlement. We were on the verge of uncovering corporate malfeasance. If we were wrong, we could be sued into oblivion. If we were caught, they would destroy us. The emotional toll was immense. I had to go home every night and play the part of the clueless wife to a man I now saw as a monster. I had to smile when he told me he loved me. I had to feign sleep as he crept out of bed for late-night business calls. Every interaction was a performance. My home, once my sanctuary, had become a stage. I felt like I was losing myself, my identity dissolving into the role I was forced to play. There were nights I'd hide in my studio and just shake, the mask cracking under the strain. I'd text David, and he'd always respond, a steady, calm presence in the chaos of my life. "Stay focused," he'd write. "History is full of empires that looked invincible right before they crumbled." He was my rock, my stable foundation. The irony was not lost on me. We were becoming the partners to each other that our spouses only pretended to be. Not in a romantic way, but in a way that was deeper, more fundamental. We had each other's backs. We were fighting for each other's futures. We hired a forensic accountant, a quiet, unassuming woman David knew through a friend. We paid her in cash, draining our small personal savings. She worked in the shadows, tracing the money, following the paper trail that Mark and Chloe were so sure no one would ever look for. The deeper we dug, the uglier it got. It was a complex web of shell companies, illegal trades, and kickbacks. Our affair was just the messy, human centerpiece of a much larger, colder crime. Mark's smugness grew with each passing day. He was on top of the world. He'd recently been featured in a financial magazine, lauded as a visionary, a maverick. He had the article framed and hung it in his study. Sometimes I'd stand in front of it and just stare at his smiling face, the ice in my veins turning to permafrost. He thought that picture was a monument to his success. I saw it as a tombstone, because we had it all. The accountant had found the smoking gun, a transfer of funds so blatant, so arrogant, it was like they were daring someone to catch them. We had bank records, emails, phone logs. We had a case that was airtight. All that was left was to choose the time and place for the detonation. I contacted a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but the most ruthless, fear divorce and corporate litigation attorney in the city. Her name was Elizabeth Davies, and her reputation preceded her.
She didn't come cheap.
I sold my grandmother's jewelry, the last thing of value that was truly mine, to pay her retainer. When I sat in her office and laid out the story, she listened without interruption. I pushed the file the accountant had prepared across her polished mahogany desk. She opened it, and her eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the first page. A slow, thin smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a predator that had just caught the scent of blood in the water. "Oh," she said, her voice a low purr. "This is going to be fun." The day of the meeting feels surreal. I wake up, and for a moment, I forget. I see Mark's side of the bed is empty, and the old, familiar pang of loneliness hits me. Then I remember. Today is the day the world ends. Or begins. I'm not sure which. I get dressed with deliberate care. I choose a simple, dark blue dress. Armor. I do my makeup, not to look beautiful, but to look composed.
A mask.
Throughout the morning, Mark is a whirlwind of self-importance. He has a breakfast meeting, then a conference call. He's closing the biggest deal of his career, he tells me, patting my arm distractedly. The irony is so thick I could choke on it. I have to meet with my lawyer this afternoon, I say, my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor I feel inside. He stops, his briefcase in hand, and looks at me with that tired, pitying expression. Sarah, are you still on about this? I told you. I'll have my guy draw up something fair. You'll be taken care of. There's no need to be so dramatic. 3 o'clock, I say, ignoring him. My lawyer's office. You should be there, he sighs, a theatrical display of exasperation.
Fine.
If it will make you feel better to have your little meeting, I'll be there. I'll move some things around. But this is the end of it, understand? After today, we handle this like adults. He thinks he's coming to my surrender. He thinks he's going to sit down, listen to my silly demands, and then have his lawyer crush me with the reality of my financial dependence. The thought of what's to come is the only thing that gets me through the next few hours. David and I arrive at the law office separately. We greet each other in the waiting room with a curt, professional nod, as if we're strangers. We are a team, but our alliance must remain a secret until the last possible second. We sit in the conference room, the file, our weapon, on the table between us. And then he walks in. Now, here, in this sterile room, as he looks at me, then at David, the first flicker of uncertainty appears in his eyes. He doesn't understand why this other man is here. It's a variable he can't account for. Mark, Ms. Davies begins, her voice cutting through the tension. Before we begin, I believe you know my client. But I don't believe you've been formally introduced to her co-claimant, she gestures to David. This is David Sterling. The name hangs in the air. Mark's eyes widen. I see the flicker of recognition, the frantic search in his memory.
Sterling.
Where has he heard that name? His gaze darts to me, a question in his eyes. I just look back at him, my face a blank canvas. And then Ms. Davies delivers the next line. Mr. Sterling is Chloe Sterling's husband. The blood drains from Mark's face. In an instant, his condescending smirk vanishes, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of pure, unadulterated panic. His carefully constructed world cracks. He looks from David to me and back again. The pieces are clicking into place in his mind, forming a picture of absolute horror. He thought he was playing 2 separate games. He never imagined his opponents would be on the same team. What is this? He stammers, trying to regain his composure. Some kind of joke? What does his marriage have to do with anything? It has everything to do with everything, Ms. Davies says smoothly. She pushes a copy of the file across the table toward him. You see, my clients have discovered that your affair was not merely a personal indiscretion. It was the foundation for a series of fraudulent financial activities. She opens our copy of the file. Let's start with the illegal capital injection into a shell company owned by Mrs. Sterling's brother, shall we? Or perhaps you'd prefer to discuss the insider trading you both engaged in based on information from her firm. We have transaction records. We have emails. We have a sworn affidavit from a forensic accountant who has traced every single dollar. She speaks in a calm, measured tone, each word a hammer blow against the fragile walls of his arrogance. Mark stares at the file, but he doesn't open it. He can't. He's paralyzed. He looks at me, his eyes pleading. This is the moment I've been waiting for. The moment he finally sees me. Not as his dependent, not as his clueless wife, but as the architect of his destruction. You, he whispers, his voice filled with a dawning, horrified respect. You did this. I don't say a word. I just hold his gaze. I let him see the 12 years of quiet resentment, the months of meticulous planning, the cold, hard fury that has replaced every ounce of love I ever had for him. David speaks for the first time, his voice low and steady, devoid of the emotion I know is churning inside him. We know everything, Mark, that's all he needs to say. The use of his first name, the calm finality in his tone, it's devastating. Mark slumps in his chair. The powerful, invincible man who walked into this room just minutes ago is gone. In his place is a small, terrified man who has been so thoroughly outplayed he doesn't even know what move to make next. This is a divorce settlement meeting, Mark, Ms. Davies continues, her voice like ice. but it could very easily become a criminal investigation. The SEC would be very interested in this file. So, would the board of directors at your firm? And at Chloe's, she lets that hang in the air. The thread is clear. Cooperate or we detonate everything. Here is our offer, she says, sliding another piece of paper across the table. My client, Sarah, will receive 70% of all marital assets, including full ownership of the house, and a significant portion of your investment portfolio. My other client, Mr. Sterling, will use this evidence to ensure a similarly favorable outcome in his own divorce. In addition, you and Chloe will both resign from your positions, effective immediately. You will disappear. In exchange for your full and immediate cooperation, this file, she taps the thick binder with a manicured finger, remains on this table. If you resist, if you fight, if you so much as hesitate, a copy of this file goes to the authorities, and another gets messengered to the chairman of your board by the end of the day. Checkmate. Mark doesn't even look at the paper. He just stares at me, his face a mask of disbelief and betrayal. It's almost comical. He's feeling betrayed. He, the man who lived a double life, who mocked me in text to his mistress, feels wronged. Sarah, he says, his voice breaking. How could you? I finally allow myself a small, cold smile. You told her I couldn't survive 2 days without you, I say softly, quoting his own words back to him. I guess you were wrong. The silence in the room is absolute. There is nothing left to say. He has no moves left. No lies, no manipulations. He is utterly, completely, and irrevocably ruined. And it was his clueless wife, with her little hobby, who handed him the shovel and let him dig his own grave. The aftermath isn't loud. There's no triumphant celebration, no champagne. It's quiet. It's the deep, clean silence after a violent storm has passed. Mark signed everything. He didn't have a choice. His lawyer, when he finally arrived, took one look at the summary Ms. Davies provided and advised him to surrender unconditionally. I watch him walk out of that conference room, a ghost of the man who walked in. His shoulders are slumped, his swagger gone. He looks 10 years older. He looks broken. I feel nothing. Not pity, not joy, not even hatred. Just a profound, hollow emptiness where my love for him used to be. David and I walk out together. We stand on the pavement outside the skyscraper, the city bustling around us, and for the first time, we allow ourselves to look at each other, truly look at each other, as people who are finally free. Thank you, he says, his voice thick with emotion. I couldn't have done this without you. Neither could I reply. And it's the truest thing I've said in months. We shake hands. It feels formal, inadequate for what we've been through, but it's all that's necessary. We are not friends, not lovers, not a new beginning. We are two soldiers who fought a war together and can now finally go home. We turn and walk in opposite directions, back to our separate, now solitary lives. The weeks that follow are about dismantling. Movers come and pack up Mark's belongings. The house, once so full of his presence, his ego, his lies, begins to breathe again. I walk through the empty rooms and feel not sadness, but relief. I reclaim the space. I move my floral business from the guest house into his old study. I fill the room where he made his deals and conducted his betrayals with life, with color, with the scent of earth and blossoms. I find the framed magazine article, and I smash it. Watching the glass shatter is more satisfying than I care to admit. I sell the big, empty house. It's too full of ghosts. I buy a small cottage with a sprawling, overgrown garden, a place that is entirely my own. I pour my energy, my anger, my grief, and my hope into that patch of earth. I tear out the weeds, I nurture the soil, I plant new seeds. My business, once a little hobby, begins to flourish. Without Mark's dismissive presence hovering over it, it grows. I take on new clients, I hire an assistant. I am not just surviving, I am thriving. Sometimes I hear things. Chloe and Mark both resigned, citing personal reasons. Their affair, which they thought was a secret, became the subject of whispered gossip in their industry once they both imploded on the same day. They are pariahs. I heard they moved away, trying to start over somewhere no one knew their names. I don't know if they're still together. I don't care. Their story is over for me. I think about David occasionally.
I hope he's found peace.
I hope he's back in his classroom, teaching history, reminding young people that empires fall, that truth eventually comes to light, and that the quiet, overlooked people are often the ones who change the world. It's not a happy ending, not in the storybook sense. A 12-year marriage ended. A life I had built was based on a lie. The scars of that betrayal are still there, pale and thin, but they are a part of me now. They remind me of my own strength. They remind me of the woman who walked into that lawyer's office, armed with nothing but the truth and a righteous fury. Mark thought he had all the power because he had all the money. He didn't understand that some things are more powerful. A broken heart that refuses to stay broken. The quiet dignity of a man wronged. And the meticulous, patient, and utterly devastating power of a paper trail. He thought he was untouchable. He built his castle on a foundation of lies, never realizing he was handing me the blueprints. And I learned that the best revenge isn't loud and fiery. It's quiet, it's cold, and it's served on legal letterhead. If this story hit close to home, and you've ever had to find a strength you didn't know you had, I'd love to hear your version. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.